I think the key for us and for Jamie is that you kind of get into his mindset and try to understand where he's coming from and write it in a way that feels believable. So when Jamie's saying those words, he convinces himself that everything he's saying is true, that he believes it deeply to his core.
Evil never presents itself as evil. It presents itself as truth. It presents itself as a kind of freedom.
In terms of figuring out what we wanted our monster to be and to look like, we wanted this creature from a distance to look like a human. So that's where the face opening came from, because we needed it from a distance with its face closed to look like a human. So when Will sees it for the first time, or really second time, when he's looking out his window and he sees it among the laundry, there's something very, very human about it.
The most dangerous evil doesn't announce itself. It tends to blend in and kind of subtly make its way into our reality.
How do I find you? What should I do?
It's about the ordinary and the extraordinary. So you take something that everyone knows and everyone's familiar with, which is Christmas lights, and then you imbue it with something magical. And to me, that image right there defines what the show is about, both in terms of tone and thematically. So I think that might be one reason that it resonates.
Seemingly ordinary things like Christmas lights or pop music or relationships or even handwritten letters, they carry significant weight.
Young lady, you know you have to pay for those. Hey, stop.
The nosebleed, I mean, it's not like we invented that idea. I think that it's been prevalent and certainly in some Stephen King stories. But, you know, we like the idea of grounding her abilities as much as possible. So we like the idea that it was, you know, causing some pain and in some way that's not something that comes easily to her.
11 doesn't wield her strength effortlessly. Her powers drain her when she uses them. It costs her something.
Something I've been wanting to talk to you both about.
The letter specifically, I remember that idea because we were gonna have Hopper sacrifice himself at the end of season 3. We still at that point, weren't sure. Eventually we decided he was gonna still be alive because we couldn't part with that character and he still had some growing to do. But because of the way that climax was structured, Hopper was not gonna have an ability to say any sort of parting words or have any sort of closure with 11. And then one of our writers reminded us that he had been writing a letter to her early on in the season, and what if she found that?
In this story, Hopper can't speak to 11 anymore, but his words still shape 11.
My gut is it's going to be very emotional for fans, especially those who've been on the journey for the last 10 years with us, but even the newer fans who are just finding the show, because I mean, it was hard for us and it was hard for our actors because it's a world and characters that we've all fallen in love with, and it's been really hard saying goodbye. I mean, this is the end of the story. 11 and Max and Mike and Joyce and all the characters in the show. I mean, we're firmly shutting the doors.
It's interesting how endings tend to hurt more than we expect, not just because we love the characters of a story, but because endings confront us with our own endings. Saying goodbye forces a deeper question: is this really the end? And Christianity doesn't deny grief. In fact, in the Gospels, it says Jesus wept, but it refuses to treat goodbye as the final word. Resurrection reframes endings, not as some final destruction, but as eternal transformation. So this part of the story works because it names something deeply human. Love doesn't stop shaping us just because someone is gone. And I know this series isn't Christian, it's not an allegory for Christianity, but moments in this storyline do kind of brush right up against the heart of Christianity, because Jesus didn't just die for us, he rose from the grave. He ascended to heaven where he advocates on our behalf, and he didn't leave us without his voice. We have his word. If you want to know more about Jesus and his word and how to have a relationship with him, that's why I created this devotional. I'm going to give you the first chapter for free, so check the description below for a link to that. I really hope it blesses you and helps you grow in your relationship with God. So if you watch Stranger Things, you'll notice how power works in this story. Eleven doesn't wield her strength effortlessly. Her powers drain her when she uses them. It costs her something. And as storytellers, the Duffer Brothers know to include that because instinctively, I think we accept it. We know that real power always demands some kind of sacrifice. And so we reject kind of a cost-free power as fake. So they want to make sure to include that, even if it's just a little drip of blood coming out of her nose. And when we read the scriptures, we see that Jesus, who was all powerful, who's God in flesh, he didn't even use his powers without cost. He gave himself entirely, sacrificially for you and for me. One reason that Stranger Things resonates so deeply with so many people is because it refuses to treat the world as flat or empty or ordinary. Seemingly ordinary things like Christmas lights or pop music or relationships or even handwritten letters, they carry significant weight. And the key insight into that is that I think we all agree with that instinct. We don't really want to live lives as if reality is just a matter of ongoing senseless motion. We want to live as if meaning is woven in and out of every second of our day. And the creators of this show have their ways of taking the ordinary and bringing meaning into it. But Christianity says that the ordinary becomes meaningful, extraordinarily meaningful, because God has entered into it with us. This isn't some story that we have to create or make up or fulfill on our own. This is the most incredible story in history that we have actually been woven into, and we get to actively participate in it when we give our lives to Jesus. So whether it's the Demogorgons or even Vecna, I think this is why the villains in Stranger Things unsettle us so much. They don't necessarily look alien. They kind of look familiar. And the most dangerous evil, it doesn't announce itself. It tends to blend in. It tends to hide behind logic or trauma or even good intentions and kind of subtly make its way into our reality. And scripture never treats evil as something out there. It treats it as something that moves through human hearts, which is why I think deep down stories like this bother us so much. And so it's always interesting to watch how people who don't have a biblical worldview try to make sense of evil. This might be the most important thing the Duffer Brothers say in this entire interview as they're talking about Henry's long monologue and his reasoning for becoming the evil creature Vecna. The thing is that evil never presents itself as evil. It presents itself as truth, as clarity. It presents itself as a kind of freedom. That's why evil doesn't feel absurd from the inside. It feels reasonable. And every destructive worldview starts with a story that explains the pain. It justifies the anger, and it promises some kind of relief. So even long before the Duffer Brothers started this story making sense of evil, the Bible has always said this: evil deceives before it destroys. It tells a story that sounds right until it owns you. I think stories like Stranger Things move us because they echo something true that's deep inside of us. And I'm convinced the story of Jesus is what those stories echo. He's the one that came to save us. He's the only one that can fulfill us. He's the one that can handle all of your questions. He's the one that makes sense of your life and gives you new purpose. At some point, we all start wondering whether the story that we're living can actually deliver on what it promises. And in the next video, Matthew McConaughey actually talks about a season in his life where he had those same questions. So check it out. I'll see you there.